We can get started. Before we begin, these are my favorite programs because I know that people are purposely here to make our panelists nervous. So thank you for coming. My name is Shakayla Alvarenga. I am the Director of Public Programs here at the Mob Museum. Again, thank you so much for being here for our Women's History Month program. Women's History Month, we celebrate this every year to celebrate the many contributions, triumphs, and accomplishments of women. So it is a pleasure to introduce our panelists for today's event. Stephanie Tai is currently a crime scene analyst supervisor in the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department CSI section. She began her career with LVMPD in 2011, and during her time as crime scene analyst as a supervisor, Stephanie has served as an instructor for the Crime Scene Analyst Academy, the Patrol Academy, and the Corrections Academy. Tai earned a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from John Carroll University in Ohio. She then went on to earn a Master of Science degree in biomedical forensic sciences from the Boston University School of Medicine. Sitting next to her, senior crime scene analyst Stephanie Smithson began her dream of becoming a crime scene analyst when she was in middle school. She is a graduate of Veterans Tribute Career and Technical Academy, and while she was in high school, she joined the LVMPD Explorer program as a CSI Explorer. Smithson graduated cum laude with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Criminal Justice in May of 2017 from UNLV. She was hired on as a crime scene analyst at the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department back in September of 2016. Crime scene analyst 2, Alondra Flores, was raised in Las Vegas, Nevada, and graduated from Sunrise Mountain High School back in 2014. She graduated from the University of Nevada, Reno with a degree in biology in 2018, and as a crime scene analyst 2, she now investigates crime scenes independently and works a variety of calls from burglaries and stolen vehicles to sexual assaults and homicides. Flores plans on continuing to teach and further her own knowledge on crime scenes. She will be testing to become a senior crime scene analyst next year. And last but not least, Danielle Courtney is currently a senior crime scene analyst in the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department CSI section. She has worked upwards of 3,500 crime scenes over the years, including homicides and officer-involved shootings. She has testified multiple times in various types of local and federal courts, including municipal, justice, district, and federal court. She has also taken part on various committees and project groups throughout the section to develop training and policy revisions, as well as help with internal audits based on accreditation standards. Please give all of our panelists a round of applause. And a special thank you to NV Energy for sponsoring this wonderful event as well. So I'd like to spend the first few minutes of this program giving each of you an opportunity to talk more about your time here in Las Vegas. And so Stephanie Smithson, we'll begin with you. Let's talk about your time at Veterans Tribute Career Academy. For those who don't know what the Explorer program is, can you talk to us a little bit about it and how it prepared you for a job in crime scene investigation?
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Stephanie. So I'm born and raised in Las Vegas, and my interest in CSI really sparked when I was in middle school, like Shakayla mentioned. I was watching all the cool TV shows that were on at the time, like CSI, NCIS, all that fun stuff, right? And that's really where my interest sparked. And when I was going into high school, it just so happened that this local school was opening up, and it's called Veterans Tribute Career and Technical Academy. And so that school is a magnet school for students who are interested in law enforcement careers. At the time, they had a police officer program, a CSI program, computer forensics, and EMT. So obviously I joined in CSI, and then through that school is where I learned about the Explorer program, which is a volunteer program for high school and college-age students who are interested in law enforcement careers, and that's done directly through our police department. And so I was in that for a couple years, and here I am.
And what does your day-to-day schedule look like as a senior crime scene analyst?
So I currently work 4 days, so 10-hour shifts, Sunday through Wednesday, at 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. So right at 6 a.m., we arrive to our lab and we conduct what's called a briefing. So that's given by our supervisor, so someone like Stephanie Tai, and along with our other squad mates. So there's typically about 5 to 6, maybe 7 of us, any given shift. And in our briefings, they typically last a couple minutes. Our supervisor will tell us who's out first for the day, what kind of calls are pending from the previous shift, and then who's going to be what we consider like going out first. So every day we have a rotation of which CSA gets the first call of the day, and then we go in order based off that. So every day it changes.
Thank you. Stephanie Tai has worked as part of the training staff for the Crime Scene Analyst Academy and as a field supervisor. What kind of qualities do you try to instill in future crime scene analysts here in Las Vegas?
The biggest quality that we look for is the ability to think critically. We teach all of our trainees the technical skills of how to do the job, but it's very hard to teach them how to then apply those to all the different situations that they may run into in the field. No two calls and no two crime scenes are alike, so they need to be able to take that technical information that they've learned during the academy and apply it to all those different situations. We also want people who can then think independently, because more often than not, CSAs are responding to crime scenes on their own, so they need to be able to process those scenes independently, thinking through the scene, making decisions on how to best process it, how to handle all of the evidence that's presented to them in conjunction with the circumstances of the event and the incident, based on what information is being given by officers, detectives, witnesses, victims, and suspects. Even taking into account things like weather conditions, time lapse, things like that. So the ability to take all of the skills that we teach them and to think about how to process a scene is the biggest skill that we are looking for someone to be successful in this position.
And when we talked a few weeks ago, I asked you why CSI, and you said every day is something new. Can you talk more about that and what inspires you in your position?
Yeah, every day when we come into work, we have no idea what we're walking into. It could be a super, super busy day. It could be a not so busy day. We can have calls that are really routine or kind of the more sensationalized, like worthy of TV news types of calls. Every day is just different, and every single call is different. We meet so many different types of people, from officers and detectives to the citizens that we come in contact with on a daily basis. And for me, that's kind of what keeps things interesting on a day-to-day basis and drives us forward, because when you walk into the door the next day, you have no idea what's going to be greeting you. It just kind of keeps you on your toes and makes things just really interesting to show up for at work every single day.
Thank you. Ms. Alondra Flores, what drew you to the field?
I think like a lot of people, I've always been really obsessed with crime shows. I've always been a crime show junkie. I grew up watching it with my mom in Spanish. I've always watched crime shows. I remember there was a spring break in college where I went home back to Las Vegas, and I went back to my mom's house, and my sister and I were in bed watching crime shows. And I remember turning to her and I was like, isn't that like the coolest job ever, like crime, like investigations? But for some reason I felt like it wasn't a real job. It was more like a TV job, not a real job. And so, yeah, time went on and I graduated from college and I moved back to my mom's house, and I remember Googling like labs in Las Vegas because I was like, I'll just work in a lab for now. And like the CSA position popped up and I was like, what? Because I saw a crime scene and it totally drew me to it. And I remember opening it up and I met the requirements, so I went for it. But it's just crazy that growing up I thought it was like a fake job, not a real job. It was a movie job, not a real job. So, but here I am in my real, not fake job. So.
And when we talked, I know that you've undergone a lot of training to get to where you are. And so for people that may not know what kind of training is involved in a job like this, can you kind of walk through the different trainings that are needed to become a crime scene analyst, and maybe how often those training requirements are revisited as well?
Yeah. So up until probably this week, we had a complete different set of requirements. I believe it was like this week that they changed. So now we have like the most up-to-date version, and that is basically you can have a bachelor's degree, and this is just to apply. So basically you can have a bachelor's degree, and that's in any field. It doesn't have to be anything specific. Or you can have an associate's degree or 60 college credits. And those have to be followed with either 12 college credits in the science or like a CSI related class, or you can have 120 hours of training and experience with like CSI, or you can have a combination of the two. So you can have either college level credits and training, and with training, 10 hours of training would count as one college level course. So, or like one college level credit. Or you can have 2 years of experience as a CSI. So that is what you would have to meet to just apply. Once you go through with the application, you would be called in for a written exam, and then you would be called in for an oral board. After that, you would go through like Metro's hiring process itself. So that basically would be like a polygraph examination, like a psych evaluation. What am I missing?
Background.
There's a background check.
Like the background investigation. Yeah, so it's a pretty lengthy process to get hired on. And once you get hired on, you would go through an academy, which is roughly like 3 to 4 month long academy. And then field training, which is also the same length of like 3 to 4 months. But yeah, after you are out of field training, you become a crime scene analyst 1, and you're able to work crime scenes independently. But you will always be getting like classes given to you to keep you up to date with crime scenes and all that. The training never ends and the learning never ends. I mean, I still go to every crime scene I can go to, even if it's not my call, just so I can see how like a senior would work it, or even like a CSA 1 or a CSA 2. It's awesome to see how they do things, because everyone does things differently. So.
Thank you. And Danielle Courtney has worked in crime scene investigation for the past 14 years. She's a graduate of Chaparral High School. Why did you choose to pursue a career in crime scene investigations?
So for me, I always knew I wanted to work in law enforcement. My father's a retired sergeant. My mom is the retired chief financial officer. So this was kind of like the family business. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So outside of college, I worked as a private investigator for a little while. And then my mom, being the financially savvy woman that she is, said, you need a retirement, you need benefits. And so I said, well, what are you hiring for? And this was one of the positions, and it sounded like a great fit. So I worked in the forensic lab as a part-time employee for a year to prepare for this job, and then I applied and been here ever since.
And 14 years later, is it still a job that you're passionate about, that you love, that still inspires you?
Yes, definitely. I mean, as Stephanie said, it's something different every single day. Always keeps you on your toes. You never get bored. I never worked any job longer than 2.5 years before this, because I'd be like, all right, on to something new and better. And this is something exciting and different every single day.
And can you explain I'm interested to hear, like, your day-to-day as well. What kind of crime scene investigations do you go to, and what is involved with investigating a crime scene?
So we can work, and as a senior, I can work anything from a burglary to a sexual assault, robbery, homicide, officer-involved shooting. It just depends what really goes on in that day. All the scenes essentially work the same. Any of the major calls are going to be more than one of us going to tackle that scene together. Basically, any crime scene, we're going to document that scene with notes so that we can generate a report, photography, sometimes diagrams, and then we're going to collect any evidence and process for fingerprints.
Thank you. And as Courtney mentioned, with her position, she can work crime scenes independently. And after being in your position for 14 years, what is next for you? What does your future hold?
So, I mean, there's lots of options. I can test for supervisor. We have a couple temporary positions to give people a break from the field, which are our training coordinator, who works directly with a training supervisor to train new employees as well as keep up with all of our training. We also have an intelligence liaison that works with crime analysts and our upper staff and looks at crime trends and maybe series that are going on that we're working. There's going to the forensic lab, working as a crime analyst, which again looks at trends valley-wide. But for me, right now, I mean, I'm living my dream, so I really enjoy coming to work every day. I don't know what the next 11 years I have left has in store, but right now I'm just loving being a senior crime scene analyst.
Thank you. Now, as we know, forensic science plays a critical role in solving crimes. It's also ever evolving. How has forensic science changed over the years? And I want this to more be a discussion-based question. What kind of modern technologies and tools do you use right now, and how has that affected your job? And anyone can chime in here.
I think that technology is huge. We recently implemented what we call our Leica system. So now, basically what it is, it's a 3D scanner, whereas before, on our major calls that we were working, we would have to essentially create a bird's eye view of that scene with just pencil and paper. But now we have this technology that will 3D scan our entire scene, and it will take measurements, and it's actually like super, super cool. And we're just now implementing that into our more major scenes. So I think that's awesome that we have that now, whereas before, probably something you would see on TV only.
Anyone else?
Some of the other changes are new technologies that are being used by our forensic scientists that then affect how we do our job. So I'd say probably the biggest one is DNA advancements and the sensitivity of their machinery and their testing. So touch DNA is now kind of the big thing for us, where it affects how we have to handle evidence and how we have to process it in order to preserve as much of the touch DNA that's on an item and to prevent contamination. Whereas, like for Danielle and myself, when we started 10 plus years ago, that was not really a concern at all. And now it's a bigger thing that we have to teach both new CSAs as well as officers and new detectives on how sensitive the new technology is.
Yeah, and to add on to what Stephanie said, touch DNA is huge now, because you could be restocking our supply room with bags from, their original boxes from the vendor, and just because simply you touch it or putting the stuff away, if another CSA comes and grabs that bag that you touched, there's a potential for your own DNA ending up on their evidence because you touched that bag and put it away. So touch DNA is huge.
Courtney, this may be a question for you. What do you think is next within the forensics field, the forensics and technology in policing?
I mean, the possibilities are endless. For a county department, Las Vegas, our Metropolitan Police Department, we rely on the county for funding. So that's kind of a lot of the issues with technology advancements, is those getting validated and then having the funding and the validation to prove that we need this system. So like over the years, we got a laser light source that we use now. And so we had to show that we used them on several crime scenes to kind of prove that it was worthy of spending the money on this equipment to use it. But it's become a very important part of our day-to-day job. So, there's a lot of different advancements that hopefully they'll get presented to us and we can prove that it'd be worth our time as crime scene analysts to use them every day.
Within the past 14 years in your position, has there been any major changes that you've seen that hasn't been mentioned yet?
The touch DNA stuff is definitely huge. Another thing is our lab getting accredited. That's been a big change since I started, because we had to revamp our entire note-taking system and how we deal with crime scenes every day. It has to fit a certain national standard. So that's been something that we've implemented in the last, 6 years or so, that has made big changes in our section.
Thank you. Now, a number of high-profile reports have questioned the reliability of forensic science in criminal courts, and these studies suggest that some forensic methods used in criminal investigations cannot consistently produce accurate results. I know that we've touched upon a little bit of the challenges, but are there any other challenges that you face within forensics laboratories today?
I mean, I think one thing with the court system is it's a misinterpretation of things sometimes, because just because your fingerprint is on a scene or your DNA may show up on a crime scene doesn't mean you necessarily committed the crime. And there's a whole other side of it as far as the investigation or any video or witness statements to collaborate all that information and do a total investigation of a scene. So I think that like TV sometimes makes it seem like, oh, we've got a fingerprint, we got DNA, that's the guy or girl who did it. And that's just not always the case. So I think that's one thing that we sometimes deal with within forensic science in the court system.
Are you going to say something?
I think one of the biggest challenges with new technologies is the general acceptance and reliability of the technologies. So science is advancing so quickly that people might hear about it. You know, we run into it where maybe someone saw something on TV and they think that's something that we can now use. But in order for it to then be accepted through the court systems, it has to be generally accepted. It has to be reliable. So for us to be able to start using new technologies, it's a lengthy process where you know, it has to be something that we see other departments, other agencies using, then we might adopt it, and it has to go through our own testing and validation process before then we are also able to use it. And then even once we start using it, then we might have to contend with the questions on how do we know that this is reliable when we are just now starting to use it. So as far as new technologies, I think that's one of the things that kind of hinders the quick acceptance of those types of technologies.
How do you think forensic science can improve the entire field as a whole? And another discussion-based question, anyone can chime in.
Gosh.
I think there aren't a lot of labs that have gone through the accreditation process like we have. With the NAS report from several years ago, it was something that labs now have to start doing. So when we were going through that process, there were a lot of growing pains. And I know for Danielle and myself, changing how we did our job from everything from the types of pieces of paper that we used to the color of pen that we were allowed to use. It creates a lot of growing pains through the system, but it standardizes things. So I think one of the areas of improvement is with all the different jurisdictions, and of course we know people aren't glued to one spot, so they may cross jurisdictions. We may have to work with different agencies, and having different crime scene units and forensic labs that have a standardized procedure across the board, I think would be something that would help as far as criminal justice is concerned.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Oh, yeah, just following up on what Stephanie was saying, it's kind of like I've gone to trainings recently where they were like crime scene related trainings in other states, and it's like they mention one way on how they do it, and it's kind of like, that's not how I do it, and it just kind of gets like iffy because you're like, oh, forget what I learned because that's not how I do it in my department. So it gets a little iffy when stuff isn't standardized throughout.
Thank you. And so when people look up forensic science, like if you do a quick Google search, you'll quickly see how many females have dominated this field in a sense, more so than in many other industries across the country. So I'm interested to hear from each of you, why do you think so many women have gravitated towards this field, and your perspective as well?
I think that I know a lot of agencies back in the day, this position was a commission position. So you had to be a police officer in order to work crime scenes. I know for myself personally, I would not have any interest in becoming a police officer just because I know that I wouldn't be able to survive the academy. And their academy is not like our academy, and I would not be able to survive getting yelled at and having to run miles and things like that. So I think having it open up to civilians and having it now be more geared towards having a science background in addition to just strictly a criminal justice background has opened up the field to more people, not just women, but more people who are geared towards that type of field, like the STEM types of fields, that it allows them another avenue to use their education and their knowledge outside of a lab setting or being a doctor.
Yeah, and to add on to what Stephanie was saying, I think for us, we arrive to crime scenes after all the action has happened. So what we call it, it's a static crime scene. So like the scene is safe, hopefully, but like we're not running after people, we're not getting into foot pursuits, we're not arresting people, we're not doing any of the adrenaline type stuff. So I think that's another factor that might be deterring, like at least the men that I've talked to have maybe considered this field into going to be a police officer. Is that it's not as fun, I guess, but I think it's fun. So it's fun in its own way. And plus, being a crime scene analyst, you have to be very methodical. You have to, be very organized and things like that. Not that men can't have those attributes, but it's not as fun. So, is what some people would say.
Yeah, I think for me too, it gives you an opportunity to serve your community and be part of law enforcement without being a police officer, because I couldn't handle that either. But I get to still go out to the crime scenes and be a part of this community and hopefully help people at the end of the day. So
Definitely. And so I used to be a news reporter, and the things that you see every day, it's extremely traumatic. And so I think it's important to touch upon that, especially in your field, because you're going to crime scenes, and it's not easy. It's traumatic, and it's something you have to live with for the rest of your life. And so, how do you cope with that? It may be something new and interesting every day, and something that you're giving back to the community in a sense, but you still have to take that home in your heart, And so I'm interested to hear from each of you on how you cope with what you see on a daily basis, because it is traumatic.
I think for law enforcement or first responders, public service, in general, the people in these types of fields are really good at compartmentalizing. You go and you respond to a call, you focus on that call. When you respond to the next one, you kind of have to wipe your mind clear of what has already happened, because now you have something else that you need to focus on. I know for me personally, starting out when everything was brand new and exciting, and I was so focused on learning the job and making sure I did things correctly, it was a lot easier to kind of narrow in on that and worry more so about, I want to make sure I'm doing right by these people, that I'm doing this job correctly. It was a lot easier to not think about the tragedies that we were seeing on a day-to-day basis, because I was more so wanting to make sure that I did this job correctly to help these people in the best way that I can with the small part that we do as part of law enforcement as a whole.
And to add on to what Stephanie was saying, I think it takes a special type of person with a special type of personality to be able to do this job, because like Shakayla mentioned, we are seeing people on the worst days of their lives. Maybe their loved one got shot and killed, maybe someone was sexually assaulted. So we are dealing with these people, and we're dealing with these types of situations on a daily basis. So to be able to compartmentalize and not take your work home, I think is huge as well. It's like you don't want to go on your weekend just thinking about that call that you just ran, or the victim and how sad it was and all that stuff too. But also it's good to have like hobbies outside of work, so that you're not focusing and harboring on all these sad cases that you worked on as well. And also using your coworkers as a resource, because they're the only ones on this planet who are going to know exactly what you saw and how you dealt with a case or whatever, and they see the same things that you see. So I think that's another thing too, because you can't just go home and tell your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your friends, like, oh, I just saw this today, and they're gonna be like, what? Like, weirdo. So using your coworkers is huge, a huge resource as well. But working these types of calls, it does tack on, I think, over time, but it's very rewarding to know that the work that we do makes a difference in someone's life and helps the victim or the victim's families and things like that, so.
Yeah, I always think about how, like, I'd rather see it than have, like, my mom see it or something like that. But yeah, like they were saying, like, it takes, like, a special type of mind to be able to, like, look at it and then kind of let it go and not take it home with you and carry it. But it is something that I think, at least for me, I think it's something you have to have before you come into the job. It's not something that you, like, learn how to see that kind of stuff. It's like you either can see it and handle it or you just can't. I just feel like I don't know, I think it would really hurt you if you're trying to train yourself to see that kind of stuff. But it does take like a special personality. But yeah, just going home and forgetting about it is nice. Hanging out with your dogs, but things like that.
I think it's something too, when we go to scenes, without sounding cold, you kind of don't connect, because if you let yourself connect, you're going to drive yourself crazy. So when we're at a scene, it's work. We have a job to do. We have to get it done, stay organized, stay focused. Let's get this scene processed and handled. And I think, again, like Stephanie said, the coworker bond that we all share, I mean, when we get back to the lab, it's definitely a vent session for a few minutes, but it's therapy, getting that off of your chest, getting it out of your system, and then you can kind of move on. And then also when you go to court and you testify and hear what happened with the case, that's like a big closure for it, to see it come full circle and that you really did help someone and did a good job. So that's huge.
Are there any programs in place or actual therapists in place that assist you?
I think that a lot of people from outside of the field would kind of, if they knew what our day-to-day schedules were like, how we interact with each other at work, how we discuss calls, they would see it as, if we were being insensitive, but it's a lot of mental self-preservation at that point. To not think of everything as like doom and gloom, because otherwise that would be 10 hours, 40 hours a week for us. But when things do get bad, we do have our police employee assistance program where we have department members who can serve as counselors to either help us through difficult situations or provide us the resources if we need someone like a therapist to be able to talk to.
Thank you. And for those interested in pursuing a career in crime scene investigation, and this will be another question for each of you that you can answer, for the ones just beginning and for the ones who have been in the field for longer, what kind of advice would you give them, maybe to some in the audience and to some watching on live stream as well?
When I was applying for a job, it was 2009, 2010, during the height of the recession back then. And my biggest advice to someone who was interested in this is to just try everything. Apply everywhere. Don't pigeonhole yourself into, say, I just want to do fingerprints or I just want to do DNA. Because when you get your foot in the door, that opens up this whole field a lot easier for you to be able to just get some experience, and then you can kind of parlay that into what it is that you want to do maybe after a couple of years. Or you might find that this is actually what you want to do. I wanted to be a fingerprint examiner, and once I did this, I was like, this is actually what I like. I don't want to be stuck inside an office building for 10 hours a day. And now I get to go out and be outside and see different people, talk to different people, as opposed to just being in a room with just the same 10 coworkers for 40 hours a week. So I think the biggest advice that I can give to someone who is looking for their way in the door is to not overlook any opportunities that might be available to you.
Yeah, and I would say that if you're interested in this field, to do a ride-along. Basically, you'd sign up to sit with one of us and ride along with us for our whole entire shift, the full 10 hours, and see what it is like to do what we do. Because you might go to school and be like, oh, I really like forensic science, I want to be a crime scene analyst, let me take all these classes, let me get my degree in this, and you'll go through all the training, and then you'll see like, oh crap, this is more than what I thought it was going to be. I'm working in the heat of the summer, I'm working in very cold weather, I'm working in all hours of the night, so you might realize at the end, oh crap, this isn't what I was expecting. Maybe before you go through all that schooling and all that time, not wasted, but using all that time up, it might be better just to do a ride-along first to see if it really is something you'd be interested in before you further your educational advancements in that way.
Yeah, following what Stephanie's saying, definitely do a ride-along. They open up a lot to you, and you get to see literally what we do every day, and it's a good learning experience for you. I really love what I do, but I did wish that I would have done a ride-along before I hired on. It is incredible to see what we get to do every day, and it is really tough, especially with the weather and everything. It's really just different every day. I mean, if it's pouring rain, you're still out there on a scene, regardless if it's 1 hour or 20 hours. Like, you are out there till you are done, and it can be really labor intensive and really mentally challenging for you. And it's awesome to go out there and actually see it real time and in real life.
I would say the same thing. Do a ride-along, join the Explorer program. If crime scene analyst is really what you're looking for, it doesn't hurt to learn photography, because that's what we do a lot of. But yeah, same thing that they all said.
Thank you. And Courtney answered this question, but I'll ask the same to the three of you. What does the future hold for you? What do you see yourself doing in 5-10 years?
I mean, in 5-10 years, I see myself doing this still. I still enjoy it. What has been nice is that, at least in my career progression, that every few years up until now, things have changed as far as job duties. We start out as crime scene analyst 1s, then we become 2s, and then seniors, and now I'm a supervisor. So it has kept things challenging as far as still learning new tasks. So, I mean, I would hope to still be able to train people and be able to provide guidance for new CSAs who are joining our department, and making sure that our section is still learning new things and serving the community in the best way possible.
Within the next 5 to 10 years, I still see myself doing the same job. I just love it. Coming in, like we talked about before, coming in every day is different. You're never going to know what you're going to get into. You might be working, 5 or 6 calls a day. You might have a kind of a slower day, but that's what I love about it. I love meeting the victims that we deal with and helping them, and putting bad guys in jail, or helping to. So I see myself right here.
Yeah, in the future for my career path, I see myself testing to become a senior crime scene analyst, and I'm eligible to do that after 4 years of being on, so that's past January of 2022. So I do want to test for that, and with that you can be a field trainer, and it just opens up so many more doors as a senior crime scene analyst, as you guys are already doing, so that's what I look forward to doing.
Thank you. And I just have one more question that came to mind. So last year for our Women's History Month program, we spoke to some of the women leaders at the different law enforcement agencies, and we talked a lot about what women specifically bring to the field of law enforcement. And so I'd like to hear from one or two of you of, is there a specific quality or asset that you think women bring to CSI in a sense?
I think maybe one of the things that has drawn women to the field has been the detail-oriented nature of the job. And I think that's maybe a trait that women are more drawn to. The job's super meticulous. Sometimes it can be tedious, but being able to be really detail-oriented and able to multitask, I think is something that women bring to the field. Not to say that men can't do that as well, but
Maybe patience too. I don't know.
yeah, patience.
Thank you. So we do have a few minutes left, so I wanted to open this discussion up to the audience. Is there anyone who has a question for one of our panelists? I'm gonna come right over to you.
I was just wondering how many investigators are needed here in Las Vegas. I imagine you're all busy, but how many are there of you?
There's like 50,
55?
maybe? Yeah, 50 to 60 of us right now. So we're broken up between 8 different squads. So we have 2 day shift squads, 2 swing shift squads, 2 graveyard squads, and 2 what we call cover squads. And on each squad, there's about 6 to 7 people, ideally, spread throughout the week. So we're 24/7, 365 days a year. We don't take breaks on holidays, nothing like that. We're always running. So about 50 to 60 of us, I would say.
I saw another hand. Okay, 1 second.
In regards to ride-alongs, how do we go about doing that? And also, when you said getting a bachelor's, does that cover the requirement for the science, or do you still have to have those science credits?
So the bachelor's degree, you can have a bachelor's degree in any field. So it doesn't have to include the 12 credits. The 12 credits is included when you only have the associate's degree, or you are trying to apply with just the 60 college level credits without the associates.
Did that answer all your questions?
And then for the ride-along?
And the ride-along.
I believe you should get in contact with our training coordinator. I don't know the specific rules regarding ride-alongs when we have an academy, because we have one starting up, I believe. But we can get you in contact with them if you're interested.
I realize that DNA is better, and maybe that's the reason, but it seems like once in a while you hear about this person who's been a suspect for 20 years, and then finally they match up the DNA, and they finally put the person in jail, or whatever. But I guess I just want to know why it would take 20 years. And not 20 years in every case, don't get me wrong, but there's been some cases that have been 20 years.
I think a lot of those instances might be situations where, say, someone 20 years ago had committed a crime, and maybe in that whole time frame they haven't committed any other crimes, so they haven't been identified yet. And it's not until maybe they do something else 20 years later on down the road, and then they get arrested, and now their DNA can be identified to them. Whereas if 20 years ago when someone was arrested, their DNA wasn't being recovered and put into a system. Whereas obviously things are different now as far as how they handle DNA databases. So 20 years ago, the information just may not have been there until they do something else that they get in trouble for, and now it's available in the system to be matched up with a cold case.
Yeah, even the technology might not have been there 20 years ago, so another thing to add on to.
A question from our live stream as well, and I think Alondra already answered this, and maybe the others can. But they said, was there a moment when you realized that this is actually what you want to do for your career?
I would say for myself, it was really the first couple of weeks after I finished training, and I was going out on calls by myself. And when I felt like I can do this. We go through 3 or 4 month long academy, and then we go through 3 or 4 months of field training where you have a more senior person who's walking you through the job. During the academy, we do classroom portions. We teach the technical skills. During field training, now you have a trainer who's taking you to real crime scenes, teaching you, observing you, making sure you're doing things correctly, but they're kind of holding your hand along the way. When I was able to realize, hey, I can actually do this by myself without someone making sure that I was doing it correctly, I was like, hey, I think this is something that I can do. And that was when I started enjoying the process because it was a lot less stressful compared to having, a trainer watching you, feeling like your job is on the line, you're being evaluated for 10 hours a day. So that was kind of the point for me.
Yeah, I feel like for me, since I was interested in middle school and I had spent so many years like pursuing this career, once I started working, I loved it, and here I am, still here, and plan to be here for a long time. So.
No, I would say the same thing. Once you get out on your own and you are doing this by yourself, it's a lot of fun. It's really rewarding. So I think that's when I was like, you know what, I can do this for the long haul.
Any other questions? I'm coming.
You guys mentioned the complexity, maybe the details of how you guys go through crime scenes. How do you guys know when you're actually finished? You know what I mean? Like, do you guys have checklists and stuff like that for, hey, I did a job really well right now, and I feel confident that I can actually go back and do whatever I need to do back at wherever you go?
That's part of where critical thinking comes in. We do have a lot of people that come in and, their biggest concern is they want to be able to pass the test. They want to pass the academy. They want to pass training. So the easiest way, and especially I think just with how, throughout the education system, it's, I got to pass this test, I have to pass this test. So we do have new people who are always asking us like, hey, can you give me a checklist so I can make sure that I do everything I need to do on this crime scene? The hardest part of this job is knowing when you're done without that checklist, because we can't give you a checklist and say every single time you go out on a burglary, you will do all 10 of these things, because everything is dependent on the circumstances of the incident and the information that you know at that time. So, there are instances where, if we are working a scene with multiple CSAs, we have the luxury at that point to kind of confer with each other, make sure everybody's on the same page as far as what needs to be done and nothing else needs to be done. So I think a lot of the things that CSAs do out in the field now are, we might recover evidence and then be able to bring it back to the lab and then think about it and say, do I need to do anything else with this later on?
I think too, when you're doing your note taking and your walkthrough, you're making that mental checklist in your brain of what I need to do to completely handle that scene. So even though it's not like a written list of what we need to do, you're already making that in your mind of how you need to complete that.
Have there been any cases that have made you want to reevaluate being in the field, or make you take a step back and change how you do the job?
I don't think that, I think for most of us who are vested in this career, when people talk about calls or incidents that might make you reevaluate what you're doing, I think for us, those are the types of calls that might reaffirm our decisions. So maybe it's a terrible call involving children. That's usually kind of one of the bigger types of calls that across the board are more difficult to deal with, but you work those types of calls and it reaffirms your decision in this career field to say, I know that what I'm doing is necessary to be able to help these families and to help victims. And, you don't want to feel like you're giving up on the profession when it's something that's needed in the community.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like if anything, it pushes me to continue doing what I'm doing and doing it well so that you can help the families later on in court. Yeah.
And it's not to say that there aren't going to be the terrible calls, but like we discussed before, you kind of have your own system of how to deal with those incidents, whether it's talking to coworkers about it, talking to a counselor, talking to a therapist, family members, friends, but you kind of find a way to ground yourself after those incidents. And, it's hard to make sense of them, but we try to do that as best as possible so that we can move on and do our job still as effectively as before.
Any other questions? Okay.
only collect evidence, or do you also solve crimes as well?
I would say we more so collect evidence for someone else to examine, like a forensic scientist. And with, once the detectives have information about who the DNA comes back to, who the fingerprints come back to, that's when they can take over and make the arrest. So I would say we're like one step, we're like a part of it, of solving the crime. We don't go out and say, oh, this fingerprint came back to Johnny Smith, let's go find him at his house and arrest him. Like, we don't do any of that. We collect the evidence for someone else to examine, and then for the detectives to make that decision to arrest and all that, so.
Any other questions? You sure? Some people are... Okay. Oh, we got him. Oh, great.
I just would like to know the 3D machine that you were talking about. What does that look like, and how does it work?
It's basically like a little box, like that's about this big, and it sits on a tripod, and basically on that tripod, once you hit start, it like spins and flips and does all this weird technology stuff where it's able to 3D scan its surroundings. I don't know exactly how it works. That's the best way I can say it.
Yeah, it scans it, and then it takes a bunch of pictures as well, and it makes one big package.
Yeah.
So it's measuring everything in the area and then also photographing it. Not the same caliber of photography that we would take, but at least you can put it all together into a 3D image.
Yeah, and it uses GPS to know where it's at exactly. And so like in this room, if I was to use the Leica scanner in this room, if I was to place it here in front of me, it wouldn't see anything past these benches. So it can't see what it can't see. I mean, it can't see behind objects. So then I would have to move the Leica to the middle of the room so it can grab, behind the benches. So it would take a couple scans to make it all one 3D like bundle.
So it's not a drone? No.
It's not a drone.
No.
No. Maybe in the future, yeah.
Any others?
Oh my God, sorry. It's normally
They're getting
when I wake up.
calls during the program.
It's my alarm. I normally wake up at this hour. Sorry.
Okay, so I don't think anyone else had any other questions. I really want to thank our panelists for today. It was important for us to recognize, some of the newcomers in the field and also some of the individuals who have been there working in the CSI field for a while. And it's so important to have women in these types of positions, and we're very excited. Yeah, we're very excited to see how far this industry grows. And I know that there are other members of the CSI department in the room today, and so I want to say thank you to those individuals as well. And thank you to all of you for coming and supporting the individuals, our panelists today, and for supporting the museum. And another round of applause. Have a great day.